a microcosm is a model of heaven and earth. Mount Sinai is a microcosm. Up at the top is God's cloud, within which He is throned. That is heaven itself. Outside the boundary of that cloud, halfway down the mountain, is a table where the elders eat with God, and halfway down the mountain is a burning bush, and that corresponds to the tabernacle holy place, where we have the lampstand and the table of bread. And on down at the bottom there's an altar, and there's a boundary, and nobody's allowed to come through that boundary or touch the mountain, just as nobody's going to be allowed to go into the tabernacle except an ordained priest, on pain of death. Levites are stationed around to take care of anybody who tries to go into the tabernacle or approach the altar, to go through those boundaries. So that's what Mount Sinai is. These kinds of rituals, the kind we're going to talk about, and the ritual of bread and wine in the Christian religion, in the true religion, are microchronic recapitulations of founding events performed in a microcosm of heaven and earth before the face of the founding deity. God needs to be there. God comes to be in the tabernacle. In chapter 40 of Exodus, God comes and fills the tabernacle with His cloud, and nobody can go in there until the cloud goes back and sits on the throne, and the rooms are now safe for people. That happens again at the temple. It happens again in Revelation chapter 15 as God finishes building His house. And this is for the purpose of reestablishing or reaffirming communion between the deity and His people. Reestablishing it if it's broken, or reaffirming it if it's not completely broken. Now, in Leviticus, if the communion between the worshiper and God is broken by some type of sin, then the worshiper needs to go and have a ritual called a trespass offering for serious self-conscious sin, or a purification offering for inadvertent sins, sins of being led astray, or just various kinds of uncleanness that can come upon you. So, to get the dirt off your feet, you bring purification offering. To get the blood off your hands, you bring a trespass offering. The whole structure of Leviticus is in terms of uncleannesses of the flesh and abominations of the blood in the book, and these two rituals are in these two categories. That reestablishes communion. But then there's reaffirming communion, which is what we're going to look at in just a second. The basic ascension offering with which the book starts is to reaffirm communion. You know, somebody needs a hug. That's all this means. I want to draw near to God. How do I draw near and get, a feeling that, yeah, everything is okay. Everything's okay. Well, that's going to be with an ascension offering, which leads to a marriage supper with God, symbolically. So, foundational rituals, and that's what the Bible is concerned with, are recapitulations of founding events performed in a microcosm of heaven and earth before the face of God, supervised and assisted by designated servants, and for the purpose of reestablishing or reaffirming communion between God and His people. These things are done from time to time. They're done voluntarily by individuals. They're done officially by the nation to keep everything going. Okay? Israel's privilege. Israel's privilege to stand between God and all the other Babelic nations of the world, to pray for them, to offer for them, to act on their behalf, to instruct them, to be a priest to the nations. Israel's purpose was to exist in mission. She had no other purpose. Her purpose was not to be blessed possessors of salvation. there are Gentiles all over the Old Testament constantly, and Israel was to minister to them. That was their calling. Now, a fundamental example of this kind of foundational ritual, one that is a little bit quicker to see, would be in Genesis 8, right after the flood. And right after the flood, Noah built an altar, a place of communion, that's what that word means, a place of communion to Yahweh, and took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered ascensions at the place of communion, burnt offering. But the word olah does not mean burn. It is burned, but it doesn't mean that. It means go up. So the whole idea here is going up. Ascension is a huge theological category in the Bible, and this unfortunate translations that we have obscure this fact. And Yahweh smelled the soothing aroma, and Yahweh said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man, for the intent of man's, even though the intent of man's heart is still evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Now, this action by Noah recapitulates what has just happened. God has just destroyed the world, and He destroyed all the animals. He destroyed the clean animals and the not clean. There are no unclean animals here, but there are not clean animals. It's a different way of expressing it, and significantly so. And now He memorializes this by taking these clean animals, who are the representatives of all the other animals, just as Noah and the Sethites were the representatives of the rest of the human race. He takes them and kills them and sends them up to God to see that the world, that they are remembering what God has done, okay? And they are remembering it before Him because the implication is God won't do it again. And He says, okay, I see this, I smell this, I'm reminded, I won't do it again. Even though people are still wicked, I will come up with another way to deal with the wickedness of man from his youth. And the way He does that is to stop the growth in a man's youth. He let the growth of wickedness go all the way before the flood. What He's going to do now is stop it at the Tower of Babel, make it impossible to go any further. The nations will all be at odds with each other, and none of them will be allowed to mature to the fullness of wickedness. So that will be His grace. So we have this ritual that has two meanings. One, it reminds God of what He's already done, and it reminds us of what He's already done. And the second thing the ritual does is it calls upon God not to keep His promise and to keep His covenant. Okay. Now that's a smaller version. Now we will take a big fat version in Leviticus 1. If you look down this page, verse 10, there really ought to be a space between verse 9 and 10, so you might want to draw a line there. Now, Leviticus 1, and just so you know, this ritual, the first thing we're going to look at, repeats the covenant made when we come out of Egypt. Okay? You were given all these benefits by coming out of Egypt. You're saved, you're delivered. But if you start to lose that, you want to walk back through that. Now, we walked out of Egypt, okay? Walk, walk, walk. We didn't think our way out of Egypt. It's a walk. It's a way as well as a truth and a life. Everything in the New Testament is about the way, isn't it? Well, this is the way that we came out of Egypt, the way through the Red Sea. And what a ritual is a walk. Now, we're not told here what this is about. It just says, do this walk. Do these steps. Go through these steps. And as you do them over and over again, you'll begin to figure out what they mean. But we're going to short circuit that here today. I won't ask you to do this ritual 8,500 times. I'll tell you what it means, because I'm nice. All right. Leviticus chapter 1, the law of burnt ascensions. Then Yahweh called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, this is not from the tabernacle. This is well before the tabernacle is finished being erected. He's talking to him from the tent that Moses put outside the camp so that God wouldn't burn the people up by being too close to them. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when any man of you, actually this says, an atom when you bring, okay, an atom. When you bring a korban to Yahweh, that means something coming near. So we're going to say a near bringing. You want to get near to God. Think of the book of Hebrews. Let us draw near, let us draw near, let us draw near. This is the drawing near ritual here. You want to draw near to God. A means of drawing near. You shall bring your means of drawing near, your offering. See, it's not an offering here. I'll give you an offering here. No, this is a different thought altogether. A vehicle by which you come near, a near bringing. You'll bring your near bringing of animals from the herd of the flock. And now we can switch over here to what I've got it here. If his near bringing is an ascension from the herd, comes up out of the herd, a perfect male shall he bring him near to the forecourt of the tent of meeting, the new tent of meeting, now referring to the tabernacle, which is being built at this time. He shall bring him near for his acceptance before Yahweh. He shall lean his hand on the head of the ascension. So here's this young bull, and we lean on it. I'm pouring myself into this. I'm climbing onto his back. Okay, I'm identifying with it, not just touch, but actually leaning. He shall lean his hand on the head of the ascension, and he will be accepted for him to cover him, to cover him, to make covering. It says to make atonement. Atonement means at one meant, and it means to reconcile. That's not what this word means. Okay, this is reconciling, but that's not the meaning of this word here. Atone, as we have it translated here, the word behind it means to make covering for him. Just as God covered Adam and Eve so that they were protected from his gaze, just as God has covered the earth with the firmament and then put blood on it to protect us from his wrath, so this makes covering for him, gives him new garments in a special way. He shall slaughter the son of the herd before Yahweh. Oh, this is not just any bull. This is called a son of the herd. This is a son. Now, in a moment, we'll read about the sheep. It's not a son. Only the bulls are sons. When we get to the birds, we have a son of the turtle doves and a member of the rock doves. A member of the flock, a son of the herd. Two different ideas. Come back for Leviticus in August and I'll tell you more. Peter will tell you more. Okay, he shall dash the blood on the communion site, altar, round about, that is at the forecourt of the tent of meeting. So we have just recapitulated Passover. A doorway with blood on it. He shall strip the ascension, tear his clothes off, which means his skin. And he will section him into his sections, and the sons of Aaron, the palace servant, the word priest means palace servant or servant of a royal household. Palace servant's a nice quick way to say that. The sons of Aaron, the palace servant, shall stoke up fire. The F-I I didn't get that corrected. Stoke up fire on the communion site. And they shall arrange wood on the fire. So we've got fire in there, and then we add some wood into it, or trees. You can translate this. And Aaron's sons, the priests, the palace servants, shall arrange the sections, the head, and the suet, which is a word very close to the word ephod. Not going to go into all that. Suet is peder, and ephod is a pod. Pod, ped. Okay, so I think it means the head and the chest area, including this lower area as well. The same as the high priest's garments, head, ephod. He shall arrange them on the wood that is on the fire, that is on the communion site. His entrails and his shins he shall wash with water. So apparently water is brought again to you, the worshiper, and you have to wash it, baptize it, the bad parts. And the palace servant shall transform all of it into smoke on the communion site for an ascension, an offering by fire, or better, a bridal food of a pleasing aroma to Yahweh. So this is a restoration of the bridal covenant between Yahweh and his people. Okay, so it becomes a marriage supper. Now you don't get to eat it like we get to eat the bread and wine. You send this animal up and he does it on your behalf, because if you got that close to God, you'd be toast, like Nadab and Abihu were. Now this is a ritual here. This is what you go through. Well, then in verse 10, and if from the flock is his near bringing, doesn't say an ascension up from the flock, just out of the flock, pick one. From sheep or from goats, for an ascension. Okay, and near bringing for an ascension, a perfect male shall he bring him near. He shall slaughter him on the flank of the communion side north before Yahweh. North. All right. So, I'm going to draw our basic tabernacle model here. Here's heaven. Here's the firmament. Here's the altar. All right. The bull was just out here somewhere. But the sheep or the goat is on the north side. And this is actually, we find out later on, this table over here. And it's put up on this table and killed. Not killed on an altar. This altar is hollow. You put stuff down inside of it. It eats it. Okay? But the sheep is killed here, and he makes a journey from north to south. No. Why? What's the big deal? Why does he have to be killed on the north side and make this journey from north to south on his way to the communion site? He shall slaughter him on the flank of the communion site north before the Yahweh. And Aaron's sons, the palace servants, shall dash his blood on the communion site round about. There's another Passover. And he shall section him into his sections, and his head and his suet, ephod. And the palace servant shall arrange them on the wood that is on the fire that is on the communion site. And then afterwards, his entrails and shins, he, and that the he here is the worshiper. And the palace servant shall bring all of it near. You, the worshiper, you better not come near that altar. Not a good idea. See those Levites over there? See those Uzis? You don't want to mess with them. He shall transform it into smoke at the place of the communion site. He is an ascension, bridal food of a pleasing aroma to Yahweh. Now, we've obviously got some differences in this ritual. You're doing it differently if it's a bull who was a son who ascended up out of the herd as some kind of a leader. And on the other hand, a member of the flock who didn't ascend up out, who isn't a leader necessarily, but who is just making this journey. Now, I'm going to read you real quick, and I'll read it to you in Hebrew English here, what we actually have in our Bibles. If his offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, he shall bring his offering from the turtle doves or the young pigeons. And the priest shall bring it to the altar and wring off its head and offer it up in smoke on the altar, and its blood is to be drained out on the side of the altar. He shall also take away its crop with its feathers and cast it beside the altar or from the altar eastward to the place of the ashes. Well, I don't think I'll bother to throw it to the east. I think I'll throw it to the west. I think I'll throw it to the north. Big mistake. As Arnold says, you don't want to disobey this. All right? He shall tear it by its wings, but not sever it. The priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar, on the wood that's on the fire. It's a burnt offering, an ascension, an offering by fire, bride food, of a soothing aroma to the Lord. One thing I wanted you to, I didn't see, because it's not even in the margin here. He shall bring his offering from the sons of the turtle doves and from the young pigeons. All right. So the bird, the only thing I really want you to see here, is it's killed here and the blood is drained here, and then we toss the feathers out to the east, which means the bird flies west. By itself, it's just one little old bird here. Now, what are these rituals? They are recapitulating events. But as I ask on the bottom of the next page, and for time's sake we won't go over all this again, where is any of this explained? I've given you some hints, but it's not explained here. And it's not explained anywhere else. It's kind of like that passage that you've heard me read so many times in Genesis. For this cause, the sons of Israel do not eat the meat of the socket of the thigh, because the Lord touched Jacob in the socket of the thigh. What? They don't eat the meat from a sheep that's in the socket of the thigh because God touched Jacob in the socket of the thigh and dislocated it. What's the logic of that? Well, you'll never understand it as an American. You know, it's not the way we think. And the Bible doesn't explain it. You have to start learning all the stuff about what animals represent and how they symbolize people and what you eat and what eating means. And then you begin to see the logic of that instinctive decision on the part of the sons of Israel. Would God have taken it lightly if the rite had been condensed or changed? To save time, you know. We'll serve the bread and wine at the same time. We'll condense it. The game is starting soon. How important is it who does what? Can you, as a worshiper, come and go up to the altar and do these things? It's very specific. Who puts the wood in? The wood has been brought there by the Gibeonites, the hewers of wood and drawers of water, but they can't put it on the fire. And the water has been brought there by the Gibeonites, but they can't take it up. You know, these poor priests, they've got buckets of water, and you've got 10 water stands, they're 10 feet tall, and you've got the bronze sea, and it's 10 feet high. And you got a ladder, you got to go up there and duplicate the second day of creation by bringing water up. And then to wash, the priest to wash his hands and feet in water from one, and to wash the sacrifices in water from the other, and I can never remember which is which. You got to go back up that ladder, get water, bring it down, and wash your hands and feet. Hands for blood, feet for dirt, or the animal itself. That's a lot of work, you know, just in order to keep telling yourself about the second day of creation and the heavenly waters and water coming down from above. Let me tell you something. If you're a priest and you've been doing that your whole life, it would never occur to you to immerse anybody. You would know the water comes down from above if it's holy water or water that's used for these things. I mean, I honestly think that's the case. I just don't think that how we have come to think, you know, going down into the grave and coming up again, that's not how I think they would have thought of it at all. Okay. But how important are the physical actions? You've got to cut the animal up into two kinds of things. A clean stuff that doesn't need to be washed and which goes in first, and then the stuff that needs to be baptized that comes in afterwards. Okay? So, what is going on here with the herd? We go back to Exodus. Make for us a golden calf, because that will go before us. Because, as for this Yahweh, we don't know what's become of him. As for this Moses, we don't know what's become of him. The golden calf is a substitute for Moses. And because the Lord is with him, the Lord is also involved in it. So it's a godling type figure. But it's Moses is the bull. So what did Moses do? All right. No big problem here. First, Moses went out into the wilderness. And Moses got to the mountain of God. That's the head and the chest. All right? And then at Passover, we can start this back up again. We leave Egypt at Passover with the blood splashed. And then the clean parts ascend up to God. Moses can talk to God. And then the unclean parts go through the Red Sea and are baptized. They're baptized, as Psalm 77 says, because it rained on them as they went through. I mean, they didn't experience the water that was there. It was the water that got on them was from the sky. And then they are brought near, and they ascend as bridal food of a pleasing aroma to Yahweh. They have been brought back, and God is hugging us again. Okay? But now how about these flocks? The flock does not ascend up out of the flock as a leader. Who is associated with flocks? In what we have read so far, who has flocks? Abraham? Yeah, I guess he has some. Did Joseph's story tell you anything about flocks? Only the first part. Who gets flocks, man? He gets the speckled ones and the striped ones and the plaid ones, all the different kinds. I mean, those Scottish sheep with their plaid wool. The words for sheep, goat, he-goat, she-goat, lamb, ewe, ram, those words, add them up, occur 55 times in the Jacob narrative. Oh yeah, okay, we know who the sheep is. And Jacob, as he came into the promised land, moved from the north to the south. So we have the land here, and we have the ford Jabbok, and we're coming from Syria into the promised land. Now we are reduplicating that motion with the flock member. I've kind of fallen out of Jacob's flock. And Jacob's flock is parallel to what? His 12 sons. All right? Hey man, you thought it was hard to keep sheep in line? Start trying to keep those sons in line. But who moved from the east to the west? Yeah, who came from Ur the Chaldees and basically moved in that direction? By himself alone, just one little dove. Actually, he had probably a couple of thousand people with him. Abraham was a prince. His wife was a princess. He had 318 fighting men in his private army. So, he was not nobody, but he wasn't as big as this situation here. He flies in. That's who he is. So if you feel one day, man, I feel like I don't, I'm feeling like I'm just not as close to God as I want to be. I feel as if I'm not really part of the community. I want to get back in the community. Well, get back into the community of Abraham by bringing a turtle dove. Get back into the community of Jacob, Israel, by bringing a sheep. Get back into the community of the theocracy by bringing a bull. And there are different levels of these things for different people. But that is what this ritual is. It is bringing you back through the steps. You see, Jacob had to sacrifice his animals. Then he had to go through a river and be cleaned. Abraham, this journey that the bird takes, there's nothing about water here because Abraham didn't pass through water to come into the land. He went to Haran and stayed there for a while, made a lot of converts there, as it says. The people that he converted there came with him on down into the promised land. But all are making this journey, and you get to make the journey too and come back into fellowship. Now, you show up on Sunday morning, you slip back into Egypt, you've been a bad boy. So you confess sin, you hear your absolution, get bread and wine, and you're plugged back into the olive tree. You're plugged back in. And you go through this little ritual step that actually starts at creation and goes all the way to the end of history. So you are guaranteed to persevere because you had wine. And you were given all the benefits of broken bread because you were given bread first. That plugged you back in. All right? That's what a foundational ritual is designed to do. And that's what the Lord's Supper is for us. It gives us Jesus, but Jesus is the totality of history. Jesus at the center of history. History starts here, goes to Jesus, and then it's going to go on forever, all right? Although there will be a consummation before it continues on forever. Well, Jesus, in his life, he is everything from Adam forward. He's the last Adam. All right? And in his life, he is the anticipation of everything to come. So when you feed on Christ's body and blood, you are plugged into all of history. This is the microcosm. Okay? Him. The church, with our ritual, is what we've been calling a microcosm, and it takes place in the church, which is a model of the universe, and it's a model of the universe because the church consists of a community of people gathered together. In the Old Testament, we had a symbolic model of the universe, tabernacle and the temple, all right? The highest heavens, firmament heavens with these stars here and heavenly bread here and another altar here that leads us up to the highest heavens, and down here altar, which according to the book of Ezekiel, maybe you remember, is a symbolic holy mountain. And you get here, and then you can go on up into here. That's a symbolic model of the universe. Well, human beings are the incorporation of the world. We are the agents of transformation. The entire world is brought before God by us. As Shmemen says, we were made to eat the world, and by eating the world, bring it into God's presence. Okay, because we are the priests of creation. We are at the top of this pyramid, over the world and under God, and we bring the world up to Him. As such, we don't need to have a building that has all these artistic features in it that symbolize the cosmos, because we are the cosmos. Okay? It's nice to have a building with beautiful things in it that maybe has additional symbols for the cosmos. Nothing wrong with that. But if all you've got is a bunch of people standing out in the field, that is the microcosm. Because you are all baptized and you are all glorified. And the tabernacle itself is a symbol of people around God. It has golden boards here. Golden boards are wood covered with gold. That's glorified wood. These are people. Okay? And then it's got a lampstand, which signifies Israelites' ministry to one another, and bread, signifying Israelites' ministry to one another, and prayer, Israelites' prayer for one another. All of these are symbols of Israelites in their various functions, and that's why when people sin, marks show up on these. Because there's a correspondence between the people and these objects. All this stuff in here. Remember that? I hope some of you remember it, and others, maybe that's a new thought. But that's what happens. The reason this has to be cleansed every year on the Day of Atonement, the Day of Covering, is because it gets dirty during the year, and the dirt is the sins of the Israelites showing up in here. All right? Because this represents Israel. And why we have all this gold furniture in here representing Israel? Because if real Israelites went in there, God would burn them alive. So you've got to have these substitutes, these mediators, these Christs in here representing you, getting dirty for your sake, taking care of their sins, your sins in here. Now that that's happened, it's okay for us to be gathered around God and be close to God. So we can draw near. And we can draw near and not only have bread, but wine, and so forth and so on.